How's it going, everyone? Bass here. I hope everyone is having a wonderful Tuesday afternoon. Today I'm going to be going over 4 defensive players I think the Green Bay Packers should be looking at in rounds 2 to 3 in the 2021 NFL Draft. Before we get the video started, it would mean a lot to me if you enjoyed my content that you went down and clicked the subscribe button and also liked the video. Speaking of the draft, a week ago I put out a poll asking if people would watch if I did a live stream during the NFL Draft, which I actually am going to do. I just upgraded my camera to a Canon M50, which gives me the capability to use it during stream, so I will indeed be streaming for the draft, and you guys should come check it out. So rounds 2 to 3 are very interesting for the Green Bay Packers because they usually hit on rounds 2 pretty well. Elton Jenkins, Jordy Nelson, Devontae Adams, Eddie Lacy, just to name a few. But then on the flip side, in the 3rd round, they don't do too well. You know, you have Jay Sternberger, Kerry Thornton, Oren Burks, to name another few. So I'm kind of interested to see what the Packers do this year because, as history shows, they tend to do really well in the 2nd round, and then the 3rd round, not so much. So to kick things off, we're going to go with one of my favorite players in this year's drafts, and that is Tommy Togiai, the defensive lineman out of Ohio State, coming in at 6'2", 300 pounds. Tommy scored a 9.12 on the relative athletics score, coming in with 40 bench reps, which is absolutely insane.
3 hours later.
.32-inch vertical, and then a really good 7.2 3-cone and a 4.49 shuttle. To put that in perspective, DK Metcalf's 3-cone was 7.38 compared to Tommy Togiai's 7.2. He's a defensive lineman. DK Metcalf, obviously you know who he is. And then the shuttle, DK ran a 4.5 and Togiai was a 4.49. I'm not mocking DK Metcalf, I'm more so showing Tommy Togiai's athleticism and his great pro day numbers. So Tommy is actually only a 1-year starter, and that's from 2020. As a freshman in 2018, he only had 121 snaps, and as a sophomore in 2019, he only had 247 snaps. In 2020, he played 7 games, which he accounted for 23 tackles, 4.5 tackle for losses, 3 sacks, and 21 quarterback hurries. After that season, PFF graded him an 87.5 overall grade, which was a 77.0 pass rush grade, an 87.8 run defense grade, a pass rush win rate of 16.1%, which is elite. Primary lined up in the B-gap alignment, so he'll project to be a 3-tech in the Packers defense if they were to draft him. So on to the pros for Tommy Togiai. He's extremely strong. He's practically a human forklift. I think the 40 bench reps at 225 explains itself. He's a legit bull rusher at his position despite his smaller size. His feet never stop churning. And speaking of his size, he's nimble enough to worry centers and guards. He's overall a really good run defender. As I said, his PFF run defending grade from 2020 was an 87.8, which I think the Packers desperately need another guy down there that's a really good run defender, and I think he would fit wonderfully. And the final pro is that Ohio State's defense didn't look the same in the national championship game when he was absent. So moving on to the cons, as I said, with his less than ideal size, he doesn't really control blocks, which is kind of a worry. And he also has balance issues due to his smaller size. Another worry is he doesn't really have that much experience. He hasn't played a 300 snap season yet, and he's mainly just a 3-tech. He doesn't have that much versatility. Overall, I see Tommy Togiai falling to the 3rd round. I see the Packers could potentially pick him up at 92, maybe a potential trade up there. But I really like the prospect of him being in the Green Bay defense alongside Kenny Clark, Kingsley Keke, and then of course Tyler Lancaster, who they re-signed. I think he would add a great presence down to that 3-tech spot and just a great run defender in this defense in general. So my next player on the list, which I know is a player a lot of people do like in the 2nd round for the Packers, and that is Asante Samuel Jr., the cornerback out of Florida State. He is 5'10", 184 pounds, so a little bit on the smaller side. He ran a 4.45 40 at his pro day with a 35-inch vertical and a 10'4" broad jump. So as for his college career at Florida State, he became a full-time starter in 2019. He's primarily an outside corner. In 2019, he played 12 games, which he allowed 34 receptions on 67 targets for 432 yards, allowed 2 touchdowns, intercepted the ball 1 time, and allowed a 75.0 passer rating. Moving on to 2020, he only played 8 games, but he allowed only 19 receptions on 32 targets, which was only 179 yards, 1 touchdown. He intercepted the ball 3 times and only allowed a passer rating of 46.2. As for his 2020 PFF grades, he had an 81.8 overall PFF grade in 2020, a 82.8 coverage grade, a 76.6 run defense grade, and a 59.4 completion percentage, which is above average for cornerbacks. Asante Samuel Jr. is basically a clone of his father, and I think he can show that undersized corners can indeed play very well in the NFL. Shout out Jair Alexander. Moving on to his pros, he has great footwork and he has good body balance for a sudden change in direction. What I love about him is he's a very, very physical corner despite his size, especially when closing in on wide receivers. He makes sure to feel the wide receiver before turning to track the ball, which is a really good trait for a corner. Overall, he's just a ball hawk and plays the ball very well. And then also, which is good, he does make tackles quickly after the catch if a catch is made. Moving on to the cons for Asante Samuel Jr., he does actually open his hips up a little bit too early, which allows the route runner the advantage. And then on the flip side, where I said I really like his physicality, sometimes he does get too grabby and he does have a history of pass interference penalties. He is pretty average lateral and straight line speed. Nothing really jumps out at you in the speed department. Like I said, he ran a 4.45 40. It's pretty on par with someone like Trey White. I think he ran a 4.47. And as I said before, he is pretty undersized at an outside corner, being only 5'10", 184 pounds. But as we know, with someone like Jair Alexander, who's 5'10", 196 pounds, when the Packers finally went off their mold at that 6'3" corner they always like to draft, and they drafted Jair, it turned out pretty damn well. I have a second round projection for Asante Samuel Jr. I'm not exactly sure if he'll fall to the Packers pick at 62, but they do have a few compensatory picks they could use to move up in the draft. Or if he did fall to 62, I would be very happy with the Packers drafting him there if they were to get, say, a defensive lineman, offensive lineman, receiver, or linebacker in the first round. Speaking of linebackers, we're moving on to my third player, which is Jabril Cox, linebacker out of LSU. He is 6'4", 231 pounds. Sadly, he did not participate in his pro day due to a tweaked hamstring, but I would expect his 40 time to be anywhere from the high 4.4s to the low 4.5s. So Jabril Cox actually spent his first 2 years in college at North Dakota State and then ended up transferring to LSU. In his first 2 years, he had 70 plus tackles each year. In 2018, he had an 84.1 PFF grade, and in 2019, an 80.3 PFF grade. He was a 2-time FCS All-American and one of the best cover linebackers in the entirety of the FCS. And then in 2020, when he transferred to LSU, he played a total of 10 games, had 58 total tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, and 1 sack. As for his coverage stats, he allowed 26 receptions on 41 targets, 0 touchdowns allowed, 3 interceptions, and a 57.0 passer rating. And he kept his mantra at being one of the better cover linebackers in the country. What is wild about him is he also played a decent amount of slot cornerback snaps. So in 2020, his PFF overall grade was a 72.8 with an 83.5 coverage grade, a 76.7 pass rush grade, and a pretty bad 55.0 run defense grade. Also a missed tackle rate of 13.3%, which is pretty bang average with all linebackers. Moving on to the pros for Jabril Cox, he has a great length and he's very smooth on the move for his height, which is really good for a cover linebacker. What I really like about him is he can press man tight ends with ease. He completely locks them up. He also really excelled at situations where he had to open his hips up, and that's when he had to locate the run or play a ball downfield. He was productive in both schemes he played at, that being at North Dakota State and LSU, which is great to see. As I said before, the snaps he had played in the slot, he's a very versatile player. He played 389 snaps in the box and 186 snaps out of slot cornerback role in 2020, which is just shows so much for his versatility. As for the cons for Jabril Cox, he's not a power player at all. 15 years ago, he would be a safety, but now obviously the NFL is moving towards these smaller safeties, these pretty much box safeties that are essentially linebackers nowadays, which he definitely is with his cover skills. And as I said, with that pretty bad 55.0 PFF run defense grade, he's pretty average to below average in run defense, and he gets stuck in mud sometimes, it seems. Overall, I think Jabril Cox will definitely be there when the Packers are selecting at 62. There's a potential he could fall to 92, but generally speaking, I see him as a second round to third round player. I think the Packers do need a pure cover linebacker. Kamal Martin was okay in coverage. Chris Barnes, PFF-wise, was pretty abysmal in coverage. They're both two young linebackers. I think the Packers do definitely need to add someone to the linebacker room, whether that be through the draft or free agency, and a cover linebacker would be preferred. For my final player for this video, it's a player I really enjoy, and that is Javon Holland, defensive back out of Oregon. He's 6'1", 207 pounds. He ran a 4.46 40-yard dash with a 35.5-inch vertical, a 10'6" broad jump, and he had a 9.47 RAS rating. As for his college career at Oregon, he was a true freshman starting safety in 2018. Then he moved to the slot in 2019. He excelled at both positions, and then sadly he opted out in 2020. He had the highest 2-year coverage grade out of the entirety of the NCAA at his position through 2018 and 2019. As for his stats in 2018, he had 48 total tackles with 5 interceptions, 6 passes defended, and an 83.3 PFF overall grade. And in 2019, he had 66 tackles, another 4 interceptions, and another 5 passes defended with an 81.5 PFF grade. So moving on to the pros for Javon Holland, the first thing that you notice is he's a complete ball hawk, as the stats just proved. 20 interceptions or pass breakups in just 2 seasons. He has great football IQ with elite processing. He executes any coverage in any alignment. What's great is he also sells out as a tackler, and he even improved from 2018 to 2019 when it comes to tackling. He has the height and length, being 6'1", 207, to be versatile at the NFL level, meaning he could really play slot corner and safety at the NFL level. I fully believe that. As for the cons for Holland, he's not a crazy athlete. He has average straight line speed and burst, which seemingly allowed him to get beat by some double moves throughout his career. And one thing to mention with him, he's probably not a box-capable safety. He didn't really get many snaps in the box, and he doesn't really have the pop to play that position in the NFL. And then, of course, like all players that opted out in 2020, we haven't seen him since 2019, so you also have to project that. My projection is anywhere from the 2nd to 3rd round, but overall, I just love Javon Holland's versatility. You can never have enough guys that can play that nickel spot, that safety spot, and he can do both at a really high level. Obviously, the Packers have Chandon Sullivan at that nickel spot, but he's on the last year of his deal after this year, and I don't know if the Packers are going to necessarily bring him back. I could definitely see the Packers drafting a nickel guy as well as an outside corner, and potentially a guy like this that could play safety as well. The Packers don't have crazy depth at safety after Adrian Amos and Darnell Savage. They have Vernon Scott and Redmond, but after that there's really no one else, so adding a guy in the draft is definitely probable. So that's about going to do it for today's video. I want to hear your thoughts down in the comments, what you think of these 4 prospects and what your opinion would be if the Packers were to draft any of these guys. And then also comment down below if you have any other guys around that 2nd round, 3rd round mark that maybe I missed out on that you really like, and comment that player down below. In my next video, I'll obviously be covering 4 offensive players in the 2nd to 3rd round, so definitely be on the lookout for that video. On that note, I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your Tuesday evening. I'll catch everyone in the next one, and as always, go Pack Go.